what if we could speak to an Illuminati insider? What if we can get firsthand information regarding what they're doing? Are they really moving people off world? Are they really creating a breakaway civilization? Do we have a system like Elysium where they're off maybe on the moon? I've speculated that what we see on the moon is actually a projection to cover up the surface of the moon, the real surface of the moon. What if it's a booming city up there where elite people can go and do whatever they want? Well, Cherie found an Illuminati insider, or someone who was recruited by the Illuminati at one point. In 1971, Stan Deyo was recruited to join the Elite Advanced Propulsion Project headed by Dr. Edward Teller. Now, during this time in Australia, well, he was secretly taken to Australia in 1971 when he was recruited, Dr. Teller, as part of the Illuminati, and designed... And in 1971, he was sent over there to decode and look at the flying saucer propulsion systems. Deyo reveals years later why they, quote-unquote they, keep the alien UFO agenda from the public. Many have investigated this huge conspiracy from the outside looking in, but only one has come forward from an insider's perspective. And we have Stan on with us, and we're going to get into a lot of things that may seem a little bizarre to you, or maybe not to you here on Truth Frequency Radio, but maybe to some of our AM and FM stations out there. But this is, in my opinion, the real conspiracy that lays just beyond the veil, the cosmic conspiracy. Stan, how are you doing, sir?
Oh, good. How are you guys?
Excellent.
Doing great.
Very good. Thank you very much for joining us. I don't even know where to begin because you have such extensive knowledge. So first of all, I have a lot of questions to get into, but tell people a little bit about your background. I think you can do it a lot more justice than I can.
Well, you kind of covered it there basically at the front of the intro there. I used to live in Mesquite outside of Dallas, Texas, and that was back in 1971. And I'd been doing private research at my home there. I set up a lab into ways to make an ion-propelled saucer craft, and I was going to patent that. I mentioned that in passing to an associate in town where I worked at a company doing computing, right near Dealey Plaza, actually, where Kennedy was shot. And I mentioned it to this fellow who was just one of the vice presidents of one of the insurance companies in the conglomerate there that we did the work for. And he passed it on to another guy who was an associate of Dr. Edward Teller, the hydrogen bomb guy, the father of the hydrogen bomb, they called him. They got a hold of me a month later. It's an interesting story. It takes a long time to tell it. But anyway, basically, they got a hold of me there in Dallas, had me come to a private meeting with a radiation research doctor, and I went into his office. It was just him and me, and he closed the door, and we looked at all the photos on the wall, and he explained them to me, pictures of him and Ed Teller going under the pole, drinking a glass of champagne in a submarine as they went under it, and a few other photos of things that this doctor had done. And I was impressed, and he sat down, and he's a big, tall man, and he put his boots up on his desk, his feet, and had me sit in front of him there in the chair, and he says, "All right, boy, tell me what you've been doing at home in your lab." And I said, "Oh, well," after looking at all the degrees and stuff he had, the mathematics background, whatever, I kind of felt pretty small, and I thought, well, how do I tell this guy I've been working on anti-gravity and stuff like that, as well as plasma, propulsion? And I said, "Well, sir, I've been working on a theory about how magnetism and electricity." And he said, wait, don't toy around with me. You're working on anti-gravity. We know that. Do you want to come work with us? And that was the start of a very long and circuitous journey around the planet and back. It took me away from home for 30 years, mainly in Australia, part of the time briefly in Serbia, Croatia, or Yugoslavia, filming a documentary on Tesla. But other than that, I was down in Australia, and I was locked out of the United States for that 30-year period. The reason is more involved. But basically, I was recruited to go down to Australia with them. They flew me and my family down to work on my part of the stuff I was interested in, and that was in a separate department from the anti-gravity department. But I came to find out that they had already done what I was doing in the late 50s, and had moved on to the anti-gravity. Well, just about that time that I was really getting excited and going into new avenues of anti-gravity and the various physics that went with it, I was invited to lunch by Sir John, who was my control agent here in Melbourne. And we went to what's called the Melbourne Club, which is, kind of like the place for the people that controlled Australia in the Round Table Association. And if you're familiar with conspiracy theory, you'll know what Round Table organization means.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, Sir John and Sir Henry were sitting across from me, and an English professor from one of the universities was there, too. We were in the lunchroom there, which in this place was like a very old-timey formal hotel with butlers coming around with little silver trays and port and cigars and that kind of crap, that kind of stuff. Anyway, we were sitting there talking, and it kind of fell silent for a minute, and Sir John turned to Sir Henry, and he said, "Henry, they're moving in on us. We're losing this one." And so I waited for them to explain, and nothing happened. And I said, "Well, sir, Sir Henry, do you mean the European Economic Community is moving in on, Australia?" And he looked at me like I had said a bad word and said, No. "Henry, going up to the property for fishing this weekend?" "Yes, John. Yeah. And the conversation went flat from there on. And he was talking about the aliens. I figured this out later as more information came my way. Since, the early 50s, I guess, apparently humans and little gray critters, which were really like biological robots, they didn't have like a soul or anything like that. They were just intelligent but soft robots. Their skin was soft.
That sounds like the Greys.
Well, that's what people call the Greys, yeah. And there were several sizes of those and functions. And above them were humans, humanoid-type beings that were slightly taller than we were, probably a foot or so. And most of them were quite handsome, men and women. And their skin, about the only way you could tell them apart from a tall human would be that at certain times in the sunlight, where you and I would sweat through sweat glands, they have little tiny scales that makes their skin kind of rainbow when it turns, in the sun, like a holographic thing.
That sounds like Palladians.
Well, I don't know. Well, I've heard that name. I don't know whether these were them or what, but I'm pretty sure that most of them were from a parallel universe. They seem to port in through a gateway, kind of an electromagnetic gateway that's up in the atmosphere a few miles, and you can get through it in a number of places on the planet. Anyway, these were the beings, and they were the ones that were moving in on us, on our bases.
Wow. Well, Stan, hold right there. I want to get more into these different races of extraterrestrials that you interacted with. I also want to get your take as well on why you term these people the Illuminati. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen, right here, Beyond the Veil. Speaking with Illuminati insider Stan Deyo, StanDeyo.com, that's Deyo. And Stan, we're jumping ahead a little bit too quick, so let me take it back a few steps. These people that approached you to work on these propulsion systems have been dubbed the Illuminati. Now, there's two different trains of thought when it comes to this group, the Illuminati. The first strain, obviously, is what's the most popular, and that is that they're an evil organization hell-bent on world domination. The other train of thought is that they're a bunch of scientists and thinkers, and secret societies going back to the Knights Templar, for instance. They were there to keep scientific knowledge sacred and safe away from oppression and church oppression and Inquisition, et cetera, et cetera. So when you say Illuminati, how did you come across how did you come to that conclusion, and what context should we be taking the term Illuminati in?
Well, I think nowadays the common name for them is the globalists, the one-worlders that want to unify all the nations and put us into a single dictatorial system of the planet. But originally, back in the late 50s, my dad and I studied this. He got me books that told me about the works of Adam Weishaupt, and that formed originally the Illuminati, as a secret society in Bavaria. And from there, I started my studies and continued them as an adult when I left home. So I had a basic understanding of the moneyed powers, the gloved hand that moved behind the scenes to control government. So I didn't, I didn't see anybody with the name Illuminati, engraved on their jacket or their forehead or whatever. They were so subtle that several times I almost got recruited by them without my knowledge. One of these individuals was a Freemason, and my dad had warned me about that, and we'd studied that too. And so when it was a family friend that was a senior Freemason tried to convince me that that's the way I ought to go, fortunately I was able to see through it and very kindly decline. This was, before the trip to Australia, obviously. But when I was approached by Dr. James R. Maxfield, who was a guy that was in the submarine, in the picture with Dr. Edward Teller, and who organized my trip to Australia. When Dr. Maxfield approached me about my work and the physics of it and how secret it was and they'd been doing it, I was thrilled. I was overjoyed, and I overlooked the caution, that my dad had told me, watch out for these guys bearing gifts. And, of course, they hit me in my weak spot. As a scientist, a physicist, I love that kind of stuff. And so for someone to pay me to come down and work on a secret project building flying saucers was absolutely just irresistible.
Of course.
So, I got down there, and as I said, my control agent was Sir John Williams, and Captain Sir John Williams, sorry. And he's now deceased, but I have a picture of him up on my website on StanDeyo.com. If you go to Stan's page or Stan's corner, I think they call it there, but whatever Holly calls it. And you can scroll down there and see a picture of Sir John if you want to do that. Now, the whole organization was most of what I was associated with, either security detail people, like really hard as nails ex-Marines or military of some sort, carried guns, and that was security, and a lot of them were from South Africa, and then we had some from Germany, believe it or not, and certainly a lot from England, some from Australia and Norway, Canada, and the U.S., of course. All these were the mix of people that I dealt with, and they didn't seem like illuminist, on the surface, but it was sometime especially when they took me over to the Australian Club, and I was asked a few days later by Sir John, one of his deputies, to ring up the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, get him out of the shower, and tell him he had to come to an urgent meeting of Dutch Shell Oil, some energy stuff, the next day. So here I was, working on physics, but I had to ring this guy, who was the Deputy Prime Minister of the whole darn country, and tell him what to do, and tell him, this comes from Sir John, and he would jump and through hoops, which he did. So I started to realize, oh dear, these guys are what my dad warned me against. These are the Illuminati, or part of them. And they were the Round Table, the branch of the Illuminists there. As far as the great critters, I was briefed on them mainly by my security detail, and I never met. Well, I don't think I met any of the Greys, obviously, that I can remember. There was one time that I thought I met two of the kind of Nordic, Icelandic featured, fair-haired, tall, handsome man and woman couple. And I was in a room alone with them for a few minutes. They were on the way to a meeting at the United Nations, and I remember I felt like a canary in a cage with the door open and the cat was looking at me. It was that kind of a feeling of a threat from them. And they said nothing unusual. Their eyes looked normal. They weren't like cat eyes or anything like that. But I just got the feeling that they were looking at me as a very inferior life form. I don't know how to explain it, but you sense it. And so that's as close as I think I ever came to meeting any of the people that were in agreements with the people of Earth. It wasn't just the United States. It was Great Britain, the United States, Canada, Germany, Russia. In fact, Dr. Teller's equal, or opposite over in Russia was Dr. Andrei Sakharov, whom the Russians put under house arrest when they let him come get his Nobel Prize. But still, he was the representative over there for the alien affairs. What is not widely known, I just mentioned it probably 3 or 4 weeks ago in passing on a show, is that we had a base in Saudi Arabia. And this base, my security detail told me about it. It was probably one of the most secure underground bases we had in the world, which had aliens and humans working together in it. If you tried to come on foot within sight of the base, you were killed immediately. There was no question, no interrogation, no passwords. You were killed. And if you tried to come in by any other means in the air and were not part of one of these craft coming in, you were shot down and killed, no questions asked. Now, this place is 120 kilometers outside of Riyadh, in the middle of Saudi Arabia. I've got an image of that somewhere up there on the website. I'm just checking real quickly. I think I've got it up for you to see somewhere. Yes, I do. What you have to do is you have to go. Do you have a computer there, Chris?
Oh, yeah. I'm at your website right now.
Okay, if you're at the main website, let me just get back to that, and I'll vector you in. If you're at the main website, you go down to where that little blue microphone is, or was. Where is it? I don't see it. There it is, yeah. Under YouTube, that gray microphone with recent interviews.
I see.
Go to the right of that where it says Show Images. Click on that.
Okay.
And then go down to image 1, which is about 4 lines down. First image says Atlantis.
Okay, I see that.
Okay, click on that, and then scroll all the way to the bottom of the page quickly. Look at image 61.
All right, I've got it up on the screen.
That's where our base was, in that arc somewhere.
Wow.
Now
that's in the middle of nowhere.
It is. I'll tell you what. Apparently, the way that we got permission from the Saud family to do this is one of the sheikhs that was involved in that controlled that area. I think it was the Salman family, but anyway, I won't swear to that because they've just taken power at the moment. But one of them was in power back in the early 60s, had an illicit affair with a woman, and he was a Muslim, and so they blackmailed him into giving us his base there.
Well, Saudi Arabia would be the perfect place because most Westerners would not want to go there. I know I never want to visit that country, but now I'm intrigued. Maybe there is something to visit off in the deserts of Saudi Arabia. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back. Stan Deyo is our guest, StanDeyo.com, the website. Don't go to Stan's website. So, Stan, there are some really fascinating photos. We were on the subject of Saudi Arabia, the base in Saudi Arabia, and the extraterrestrial encounters or the extraterrestrial cooperation. Now, a question comes to mind. Is this a group of globalists, the Illuminati, these people that recruited you at one point to work on anti-gravity propulsion systems, are they in league with these extraterrestrials, or are they working with these extraterrestrials? Maybe they serve the extraterrestrials themselves.
Yes and no. We help them build a lot of their underground bases and manufacturing facilities in various secret locations. they pushed through from the parallel universe. They pushed through, gated through, whatever you want to call it, and there was a war where they lived with the ruling authority, and they were pushed through the gateway with limited technology that came with them, their craft and whatever they had in it. So they needed to rebuild their war machine, in essence, because the fight's going to continue down here shortly from the parallel universe with them. And so they kind of coerced the Illuminati into helping them build these underground facilities in return for the secrets of anti-gravity and, very interesting molecular physics that let you walk through solid walls without damage and stuff like that, and altering time, the passage of time. Now, they did all this, and they let us have that much, and a few other smaller things that to us were really huge in industry. But anyway, but in 75, I think it was, they started moving on us in our base, 74, 75, and they started shootouts with us to move the humans out of the bases because they had already built, the aliens had already built enough of the infrastructure they needed that they didn't need us anymore. They could reproduce and increase their technology without us. They didn't want us peeking over their shoulder. They treated us kind of like fodder. It's the best way I can describe it. So when they did this, the powers that be in the Illuminati and in the banking facilities and all that kind of stuff were obviously quite concerned. But the leader of this group of rebels from this parallel universe said, look, we'll make a deal with you. We're going to set up a global government. You guys can run it. We'll back you. But leave us alone. We've got a war to handle that's coming here. We're the good guys, and the guys that are coming through are the bad guys. That's how they described it. So, if you run a parallel to the Bible stories about the end times, you see that the leader of these quote-unquote aliens is Satan, and his alien, like angel beings, were kicked out of the heavens, the parallel universe, into our world to stay here and get ready for a battle, the last battle at the day of Armageddon.
Wow. So this really goes back even before the time of the flood, way back to our ancient history, the fallen angels.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Look, I tell you what, there is so much to tell you tonight. I can't possibly get through it all, but I'm going to tell you about the Garden of Eden, where it is, and why it's important, where Atlantis is, and how the aliens were there, or the fallen ones were there before, and how they're there again. And, in the middle of everything that's about to happen, that's about to be a short tactical nuclear war in the Middle East. It's going to happen very soon. All these things are they all fit together. I've finally got the picture. And to find Atlantis is one of and the Garden of Eden, these are two of the greatest archaeological discoveries a person could ever hope to discover, and I have done it and proved it.
Well, take us away, please, wherever you want to begin.
I'm not. I'm going to spoil it by saying where these places are to start with, so that you can follow along with me because of shortage of time. First of all, the Garden of Eden. I proved this on a set of DVDs that I've got there. One of the DVDs is on it. Atlantis. Not Atlantis. The Garden of Eden and the Solomon Lectures. You can get that on our website and go back and look at that later. But the Garden of Eden is in northern Tanzania, and it's in the inside of a collapsed volcanic crater, the only one in the world that's still got the volcanic rim intact around it. And I traced the Garden of Eden to there and the four great rivers that came out of there and where they went and how they became coastlines as the Pangea, as the earth split apart. And to underscore what I'm about to say about Atlantis and about Eden and about the flood and what caused it, we must accept a couple of things here. These are the basic premises that physicists will say, oh, no, it can't be, but they're going to have to catch up. Modern physics, cosmological physics of the universe, is saying that if something like a Big Bang occurred and all the mass in the universe was condensed down into a small dot down in the beginning, then it was very compact. It was very dense. And electromagnetic waves like light and all kinds of electromagnetic frequencies traveled a lot faster because everything was denser. As a result, as the universe expanded out to where it is now, the speed of light dropped, slowed down. The speed of all electromagnetic radiation slowed down. And that meant that dating things with radiocarbon dating was incorrect. all radiometric dating was incorrect because they all assume, part of the physics involved is they assume the speed of light is around 186,256 miles a second, and it's basically stayed that way forever.
That's a good point.
But that's wrong. It is now decreasing. In the last 200 or 300 years, it's been decreasing. We follow the curve back to the Big Bang, and it's an exponential curve. At the Big Bang, the speed of light was 60 zeros. One was 60 zeros behind it, times faster than it is now. I can't even say the number, it's so big. And as a result, you have to plug that factor in to the age of the universe, to the age of the sun, to the age of the earth, and to our ancient history. When you do that, the earth is probably less than 50,000 years old. That's from the magnetic data we can get. And, the talk about Atlantis being 12,000 years ago or 9,000 BC or so, that's acceptable. And the Garden of Eden back in there, too. There's a dating error, we think, in the Hebrew account of when the Garden of Eden started. So when you put all these things together, the earth is much younger, and dinosaurs roamed with men. I've seen the footprints in Texas myself. If you've been to Glen Rose, I know you've been in Texas. If you've been to Glen Rose to the dinosaur tracks there, you can see human footprints walking in the mud next to the dinosaur.
Oh, yeah.
So they coexisted.
I took Cherie when we first met. We were right there in Allen, right next to McKinney. So we have been down to Glen Rose. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay. So, all right. Now, here's the next difficult thing. Physicists say, look, the mass of the Earth can't change. Okay, I agree. But the Earth has been smaller in diameter than it is now by about 25%. It has expanded since the beginning of it. And in part of the gravitational theory I was working on back in the days there in Australia, I developed a fluid mechanics version of the whole universe, that space is like a fluid. You treat it like a fluid. And it spirals. It's the original Big Bang generated spirals like smoke in a crowded bar. When you blow into it, it makes spirals of things out there. And these are galaxies, and within those are planets, and they form. But what happens is, as they form, it's a horrendous, fast speed in a very viscous space. And it's like stirring honey, cold honey. It's to the speed of this energy going into the fluid of the universe. So what happens, it's like in a glass of water. You pour some white sand and some black sand in and stir it up, and you watch what happens in the middle. We'll get to that after the break.
Excellent. We'll be right back. And Stan, let me say this too. I have seen petroglyphs that depict dinosaurs. There's no way that could have happened unless they were both walking the earth at the same time. So I think you're onto something. We'll be right back right here as we go deeper beyond the veil. How far back that goes. But what is the significance of the change in date? How does that change the dynamic of all of this?
Well, it's going to let me explain why Eden is where it is, Garden of Eden and Eden are where they are, why Atlantis is where it is, and how this plays into what's about to happen here with the alleged alien formal announcement to the planet. Going back to the speed of light and the age of things, the Earth used to have all of its continents together, and that was in, like Pangea, they called it. Officially, that was 100 million years ago that this landmass started to break up and continental drift, at inches per year, kind of gradually moved the continents to where they are. That's an era. If you adopt the speed of light change and the shortness or the youngness of Earth and the universe, what happened was, back around 2345 BC, Pangea split then. There's part of it in the records of the Egyptians, which Velikovsky mentioned, and Earth in Upheaval, and also Worlds in Collision, part of that. But that means that everything was together. The United States hooked onto North Africa and part of Europe there at the Mediterranean, and India and Madagascar snuggled up to Arabia and Africa, and Australia snuggled up to India. All of this was together. And now on the first, the top row, image 12 shows Eastern Pangea there without the United States, just showing the eastern leg of it. At the time that everything was together, when Atlantis was there, when the Garden of Eden, even though it was closed, was still there, and everybody knew where it was. This is before the flood. And if you look to the next image, or to the left, number 11, and you click on that, you'll get a bigger picture of it. You'll see that I've taken Professor Owen, Dr. H.G. Owen over in England, I've taken his map of the way all the continents fit together, and I've put the biblical names over the top of the countries for a very special reason. This is when everything was together, and if you look at that map, you'll see over to the left something called Joktan, Joktan. In English, that's English translation of the name of the guy that's in image 10. He was the 1, 2, 3, 4th generation down from Shem after the flood. His name was Joktan. Now, when you look at image 11 and see his name over what's now the Yucatan Peninsula, you say, so what does that have to do with anything? Well, that meant that Joktan, after the flood, 4 generations after, he had migrated over with his people over to that area, which is, now part of the Yucatan Peninsula. If you say to the people in the Yucatan Peninsula, to the Mayans or Aztec descendants, whatever, why do you call this the Yucatan? They have no idea. If you look in the Hebrew for this Joktan, his name in Hebrew is Yucatan. And that tells you that they were there before the earth split, and they were the 4th descendants, the 4th generation from Shem, from Noah. So, okay, now that splits, that takes care of them. They're split apart. You can now put that drawing away. And understand that as the continent split, what caused them was a huge asteroid impact. In fact, it could have been several. I found one, the mystery one that the oil industry has been looking for in the Indian Ocean. I found it. And it made a crater that's 240 miles wide. And the main impact hole that it made, that's not the crater, but the hole, shows that it was 15 miles in diameter. And it traveled in at about 32 degrees angle going from the west to the east. In fact, if you go down to the 4th row at number 1, Atlantis Island, and click on that, that will take you over to some coast-to-coast images I did the other day, and it will show us that asteroid, where it hit. And they go to slide 5. And you click on slide 5, and you see that it's the tip of India. And where Sri Lanka is kind of hanging on to the bottom of India, it was split apart from India by the impact of what I call the Kudapa asteroid. And that was the initial small hole it made, but the big hole it made, you go back and you look at slide 1. And slide 1 shows the raised and lowered areas of the surface of the Earth. NASA finished this some time back. And you're looking where the purple is, the magenta, and you will see that an area of 6 million square miles is depressed there from something, and it's a dent, right? And if you look to the right where the arrow points, there is an area on the southwest part of the Ring of Fire in the Pacific that is pushed up about 6 million square miles, pushed up 350 feet.
I see that. Let me ask you this, Stan. How do we know that it's asteroids and it's not maybe nuclear weapons?
Oh, I'll tell you why. Go back to slide image number 6.
Okay.
This is the Banda Sea. That Banda Sea is the rim of the asteroid that made the hole over in the Indian Ocean and shoved its way all over, kicked New Guinea and Australia and Indonesia over into where it is now in the Pacific. That is the bed made when the asteroid stopped.
Wow.
And it's the same kind of footprint. You'll find that modern scientists have already said there's one like this at the southern tip of Argentina. It's called the El Tanin meteor. And the El Tanin meteor, if you look at the southern tip down there, I don't know that I've got that on here. I'm just looking quickly. Anyway, look up El Tanin asteroid at the South Pole, and you'll see it made the same kind of a footprint as it collided into the surface. And it's almost like it was a big, slow-moving giant that shoved everything. Instead of making a direct hit in a normal-type crater, it pushed it ahead and shoved up the rim. And in this case, it made the Banda Sea.
Well, it seems like we've been bombarded. The question is, did all this happen at once, or did this happen over the course of hundreds of years or thousands of years?
It could be the latter, over several years, hundreds or whatever. Because if you look at 7, I have an animation showing all the others. I found 4 other impact zones like this, one in China, one in, let's see, the Philippines. There are a number of other big impact craters like this, or shoved craters that you can see, and these are huge. Now, the one that caused the flood and sank Atlantis is the Banda C one. There is no question about that in my mind. It's the one, you see it in that number 1 graph or image, where you see that huge depression where it pushed down the seabed and shoved the majority of it ahead of it over into the Pacific Rim. But what you don't understand is that when it hit like that, at that low angle coming from the left of your picture going to the right, west to east, it shoved a bunch of the seabed and the mantle of the planet underneath that up into the air and back behind it onto Saudi Arabia, onto the lower Arabian island it was at the time.
It sure does look like it.
Well, the oil industry tried to understand, and I've had the geologists contact me. One of them contacted me on Skype from his laptop in Mongolia when he was out there. He said, I just heard what you were saying, and we have been trying to figure out how this happened and what caused it, and you've just answered the question. So if you go down to slide 28, 29, and 30, these are what he sent me from a talk they were having, trying to figure out where all this overburden, 9,000 feet of it, of the seabed and mantle, how it deposited over Oman and the southern part of of the Arabian Peninsula. They couldn't find the meteor that did it, and I found it for them. Look, I tell you what, it is there, and they are so excited now because they say, well, now we understand. It backflowed, as it splashed, it blew all this ophiolite over the top, and you'll see that in the images there, particularly in image 29. And then a close-up version of Oman where the ophiolite deposited in image 30. So this is geological proof that the asteroid was there. They couldn't find it, and I found it. And now in Australia, down in Marble Bar, which is on the northwest part of Australia, a physicist there, or geologist there at the University, Australian National University, about 4 months ago published a paper saying there was a dirty big meteor hit somewhere out there because it left glass spherules in the strata beneath us here. He was drilling down, and he said, I don't know where it is, but it had to be about 12 to 15 miles in diameter. So I wrote to him. I said, I found it. He said, oh, it can't be. The age of the strata don't match. He just did not want to open his mind to the fact that it shoved Australia clear over where it is now from where it used to be. And, until you can get them to break free of this, the constraints of, modern science. Look at slide 8 on that Atlantis page. Slide 8, I have black Australia, black India, black New Guinea. You can see that. We'll talk to that after the break.
I do see that. This is incredible stuff, Stan. I've got to give you that. StanDeyo.com, ladies and gentlemen. And again, for those of you just joining us, if you want to follow along, we have the images at tfrlive.com/stan.php. Don't forget the PHP. It forwards you straight over to Stan's website. We'll be right back. Hour number 3 coming up.
Preparing to initiate phase 3 momentarily. Brace yourself, traveler. We are about to venture into the realms of the unknown. www.beyondtheveilradio.com